When it comes to scripts based on pre-existing source material, it can be a tricky task to translate that material to screen, whether it's a book, a play, or even remaking another movie. However, in adapting those works, screenwriters can oftentimes come up with something that allows the plot to move in an entertaining manner and the dialogue to leap off the screen. Sometimes they're faithful, and at other points they make the necessary changes. And now I'm going to celebrate these by counting down what I think are the finest adapted screenplays ever written, starting with LA Confidential. If you were to ask me what I think are among the smartest screenplays put to film, this will likely be one of the first that comes to mind. Adapting James Ellroy's crime novel, Curtis Hanson and Brian Helgeland had to weave a complicated plot full of characters with specific motives and make it understandable to the viewer. They pulled it off fantastically as the script bounces between the various characters and the mysteries a few of them are trying to solve. The friction and eventual partnership between these policemen is properly handled along their individual subplots, and each successfully grow and develop as the story goes through its twists and turns. The themes on police corruption and how anger and sex fuel these morally mixed up characters are expertly explored. There's so many clever details and character moments throughout the script that enrich and take you into this noir vision of 1950s Los Angeles. Sense and Sensibility. If that last script is one of the smartest, this is one of the wittiest. Based on the book by Jane Austen, Emma Thompson brought such a great voice to her screenplay. There are several hilarious lines throughout, and they each fit the attitudes of these characters and the situations they are in. The script does an exceptional job of creating investment in the Dashwood family and their role within society. The romantic storylines that emerge are well handled by Thompson, showing how these relationships change and evolve. We see how the various complications affect the Dashwoods, but what makes the story so engaging are the personalities on screen. Thompson's script goes for subtlety as well as more obvious character moments that help flesh them out. Period pieces are often seen as stodgy affairs, but Sense and Sensibility is a film and script I point to as an example of how they can also be fun and witty and charming in all of the best ways. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. The other screenplays I include on this list stay within the genre of the original source material, but this is a case where the writers took the story in a wildly different direction. Peter George's book, Red Alert, was a serious story about a general ordering a nuclear attack, and Stanley Kubrick had originally intended to keep that tone. However, when working with George on the screenplay, they started to see the dark humor in the situation, and it was then turned into a comedy. Terry Sutherland would eventually be brought in to provide his own input. They added a number of elements like a mad former Nazi obsessed with nuclear power, although the plot was largely retained from the book. The result is hilarious screenplay with so many great comic scenes and perfect one-liners. The most iconic, of course, being, "Gentlemen, you can't fight in here, this is the war room." As we jump between the politicians and war strategists in the war room, the pilots of the bomber plane, and the general responsible for the whole ordeal, the script satire stays on point and still holds up, unfortunately a little too well in the decades since the film's release. The writers took a serious subject and managed to find the comedy out of it, which was quite the monumental task. Jaws. When people ask what movies are better than the book, Jaws is often mentioned. Having read Peter Benchley's book, I can attest to that. Steven Spielberg even said that when he read the book, he hated the characters so much he began rooting for the shark. So when he was hired to direct, he asked for a number of elements to be removed, specifically a subplot involving the mafia and a soap opera storyline where Hooper, Chief Brody, and his wife are in a love triangle. Benchley wrote the initial drafts, and then most of the remaining script we see on screen was written by Carl Gottlieb. The finished screenplay properly fleshes out the main characters, especially Brody, and the effect that the shark attack has on Amity Island. A lot's been said about how difficulties with a mechanical shark led to less scenes of it being on screen, but the characters are already interesting on the page. There's also some fantastic political commentary, with the mayor initially being more preoccupied with profits than safety, even with all the warning signs. The dialogue pops with several fantastic character interactions and quotable lines. Who can forget Brody saying, "You're going to need a bigger boat," after seeing the shark close up for the first time. One of the most famous parts of the film is the speech given by Quint about his time on the USS Indianapolis. However, Benchley and Gottlieb were not responsible for that monologue. It was said to have come from Howard Sackler, John Milius, and Robert Shaw, although the extent of their individual contributions is unclear. Regardless, it's excellently written. Jaws works as a thriller about a killer shark, but it also understood we needed to have characters we were invested in and who we hoped succeeded in stopping that fish. Schindler's List. A far more serious Spielberg film, this was able to show the evolution taken by Oskar Schindler and tackle its tough subject matter. Based on Thomas Kenneally's non-fiction book, Schindler's Ark, the initial drafts of the script went through a few writers, including Kenneally himself. In the end, Spielberg went with Stephen Zaillian's script, and he managed to write something that told the story with the needed dramatic weight. The film shows Schindler's change in his reasoning for saving the Jewish people, along with showing how the Jews themselves are affected by this. It does not sugarcoat the horrors of the Holocaust, and in particular the actions of Nazi Commandant Amon Goff. Zalian handled everything with care and sensitivity, and he made sure the people who were watching feel real. Schindler's not depicted as a perfect person, merely someone who eventually realized the importance of saving the Jews working for him. Meanwhile, Goff's evil is showcased with the necessary level of disgust and uncomfortableness. Schindler's List was able to depict the Holocaust and the necessity of people like Oskar Schindler who recognized the evil that was happening and sought to make sure the death toll did not grow higher. Goodfellas. Adapting Nicholas Pileggi's book Wise Guy, which chronicled the life of gangster Henry Hill, Pileggi and Martin Scorsese's screenplay becomes a compelling and entertaining portrait of his rise and fall. The narration by Hill through the film pulls us into this world and the thrill he initially gets from his mobster activities and what attracted him to that lifestyle. However, we do eventually see the dangers of such a life and the extreme paranoia and other problems that set in when partaking in a life of crime. It does not shy away from what a violent life this is and the danger caused by getting involved with the mafia, while also being a strange story about friendship. The partnership that Hill has with Tommy DeVito and Jimmy Conway highlights the closeness these gangsters have, although there is an uncertainty of who might end up betraying them. His romance with his wife Karen is also depicted in an interesting manner, and we even see the events through her point of view a few times. The dialogue has great rhythm to it as we see the interactions and the strangely comical conversations they have. There are some who watch this movie and think it romanticizes the gangster life, but I don't feel that way at all. These are terrible people and the script does not attempt to make them sympathetic. Goodfellas is a peek into an underground world and the contrast between their classy suits and the violence they frequently commit. Kaza Blanca. This is a case where the film has absolutely become a lot more well-known than the source material. This classic movie was based on the play Everybody Comes to Rick's by Murray Burnett and Joan Allison, which includes several of the elements which will become familiar to moviegoers. The plot is roughly the same, as are the anti-Nazi themes in a few of the names, although Ilsa was originally named Lois in the play and was American. The use of the song, As Time Goes By, also originated in Everybody Comes to Rick's. It should be noted the play was not performed prior to the production of the film, although the credits still state the screenplay is based on said play. Howard Koch, along with Julius and Philip Epstein, were credited for writing the script, and they certainly did a marvelous job. The characters are all fascinating as they deal with the complications that arise, whether from the Nazis or this reunion between two lovers who have drifted apart. There's so many classic lines, from I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship to we'll always have Paris. Although my favorite bit will always be Captain Renault accepting his winnings after announcing that the shop gambling is going on in Rick's Cafe. Kaza Blanca is highly regarded primarily because of the screenplay and how it successfully brought Burnett and Allison's play to the screen for everyone to enjoy and cherish. The Shawshank Redemption. Frank Darabont faithfully adapted Stephen King's short story Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption, and the result was a prison film that showed how Andy Dufresne navigated and tried to survive behind bars using his intellect, all while plotting his escape. The film is told almost entirely through fellow prisoner Red's narration, and it's effective in making us understand the passage of time and the effect that being in prison can have on anyone, especially for an extended period of time. Like I said, Darabont stayed very close to King's story, but he did make some necessary changes. One of the most important was combining different wardens into one character, and his animosity towards Andy becomes a central part of the film. He also added the scene where Andy plays Mozart over the speakers and expanded on the elderly inmate Brooks, who becomes a tragic character. What The Shawshank Redemption does so well is make you care about Andy as he deals with the politics of his prison life and the constant hope that maybe he'll finally get out. For films set almost entirely in a prison and featuring a fair amount of brutality, there is a surprising hopefulness to the film, and a large credit for that goes to Frank Darabont and his handling of the story. The Godfather Parts 1 and 2. Yes, I am cheating a little bit here by putting both of these screenplays together. After all, Francis Ford Coppola and Marc Puzo, in adapting Puzo's book, did not write these two films at the same time, although Puzo did start jotting down ideas for sequel even before the first movie was released. Both films complement each other so well and are able to show Michael Corleone's descent into crime and the effect this has on him and his family. The Godfather introduces us to the Corleone family and several of its members with ease, and it does not take long to become fascinated by them, especially Michael and his father Vito. They have, of course, iconic lines like "I'll make him an offer he can't refuse" and "Leave the gun, take the cannoli," and several famous scenes like the horse head in the bed. However, what makes The Godfather so compelling is seeing how Michael goes down this path he initially thought he never would. And then Part 2 goes even deeper into that, while juxtaposing it with Vito's past as he first arrives in America from Sicily and makes his new life there. Both scripts are extraordinary in the exploration of the Corleones and the importance they place on family. I cannot imagine Part 1 without Part 2, hence both screenplays deserving to be placed in the same spot. Before I reveal my number one, I do want to bring up some honorable mentions of adapted screenplays I would have loved to have included but just missed out. And they are The Producers, The Exorcist, The Social Network, Beauty and the Beast, Clockwork Orange, Eyes Wide Shut, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, MASH, The Departed, Some Like It Hot, To Kill a Mockingbird, and All About Eve. But my number one favorite adapted screenplay is Amadeus. Peter Shaffer adapted his own play about the fictional jealousy Salieri has for Mozart, although nothing about the movie feels like it originated on the stage. As told through Salieri, who may also be an unreliable narrator, this becomes a fascinating portrait of the legendary composer. At times humorous and at other points tragic, it's about how someone so vulgar also has this pressure to be this brilliant musician. It takes these elements from Mozart's life and creates a highly entertaining story about classical music and what jealousy can drive someone to do. Both Mozart and Salieri give him a lot of complexity as they wrestle with their demons. We also see Salieri's manipulation of him and the effect this has on not only Mozart but his wife Constance. Shaffer fills his screenplay with all kinds of out-there characters that only makes it that much more rewarding. We even have some who disappear and then reappear in the right moment, and it has a way of mixing its brand of humor with the lavish Austria it's depicting. Amadeus is an excellent screenplay and even manages the task of appealing to those without an affinity for classical music. Now let me know in the comments what your favorite adapted screenplays are, and I'll see you next time.